Saint Gregory by Charles Boehler. Part 1. Abbey of the Holy Ghost. Chapter 1. Far from Home. August 20th, 1859. Black waters roiled and churned. Father Ambrose Odenwald stood at the bow of the SS Teutonia, gazing into the gloom of the Atlantic. Storm clouds threatened on the horizon as distant thunder rolled, and his robe was wet with salty spray. The old world of his German homeland lay weeks behind, the new world somewhere ahead. It was a long journey, far from home, one he had never wanted to make. Everywhere was the smell of grease and coal and smoke mixed in the briny air. Children ran across deck, their mothers calling them from below, while men smoked idly, passing the time. They stared silently into the abyss of black waters as the smoke pipes bellowed and the engine thrummed below deck. Who could imagine something so vast? The enormity of it overwhelmed, echoing Ambrose's task. While others had chatted nervously on the long voyage, he had kept to himself, a brooding man in a black cassock, with dark eyes and stubbled cheeks beneath a head of tousled hair. In the graying light, he read the letter from Cardinal Eberhard once more. It is much to ask, but I form this commission with you in mind. I cannot bear that Bishop Stephen is missing, and I hold myself personally responsible that I could not dissuade him from his desire to save that mad fool Father Valentine. I know of your closeness to Stephen in your youth, and his friendship with Christoph, your late father. Indeed, how he must have served as a father to you in his own right, after your own passed when you were so young. It is therefore only right that I send you to find him, knowing you would never rest had you not personally exhausted every effort. Find whatever news you can of Stephen, whether he be alive and stranded, missing, or worse. But be cautious. Valentine is quite mad, and I fear what corruption he may seek to sow, now that he has fled Mudau under threat of excommunication. Calling for the death of the Pope and his own establishment in his stead reflects a frightening and troubled mind. Where are you headed, Father? Ambrose looked up from the letter. A young man leaned on the gunwale, an ashy cigarette in his yellowed fingers. Heavy air, thick with spray, curled the smoke about his gaunt and haggard face, and his eyes were listless, as dreary as the day. I'm seeing about a town, Ambrose replied, or rather, a congregation. The priest's voice was soothing, yet his eyes were guarded. The man flicked his cigarette into the sea, the red ember snuffed in the waves. Does this town have a name? Ambrose hesitated. What could he tell, other than stories written between the lines and letters sent home? A doomsday prophet, a cult, townsfolk dead and missing, and his dear friend among them. It all centered around that tiny place in the wilds of the American frontier, St. Gregory. Ambrose pursed his lips and shook his head. You wouldn't have heard of it. The man eyed him, studying Ambrose's narrow cheeks and hawkish nose. He nodded slowly, sniffing in disinterest, and rubbed his greasy head. It was clear the priest was not in the mood to talk. Probably not, he said, and walked away. Ambrose turned back to the horizon, his thoughts on that distant town. His skin crawled. He had seen the blank faces of those true believers before, in the chapels that dotted the Rothar Mountains. He had heard Valentine's prophecies of the reckoning to come. The deanery had finally rid itself of the mad priest's perverse influence. Why did Stephen have to leave on some mad quest to save him? The gray clouds finally parted the morning the American coast rose into view. What at first was a dull green haze on the horizon grew into the outline of masts and ships, followed by a sprawling city on the hill above, A jumble of boats and ramshackle warehouses lined the docks, and everywhere a mix of people massed such as he had never seen in one place. He blinked unbelieving at the dirty throng. Irish and English and French and Dutch swarmed on ships laden with sugar and spices and coffee, while black and brown-skinned men from the West Indies, the sugar plantations of the Caribbean, hauled crates of rum. And everywhere, among such wealth, were the poor. A line of men toiled, their burned backs bowed under heavy loads of crates and boxes, while others lay drunk in alleys. Washerwomen and prostitutes swept in and out of the sprawl of squalid, nameless buildings, while everywhere homeless children ran in gangs underfoot. As the ship neared the wharf, the smell of the harbor rose rank from the churn of the brackish water below, and Ambrose turned and covered his nose. Old crates and barrels bobbed in the black-green waves amid a filth of bottles and sewage and rotting fish. So this is the famous Boston harbor. It was hard to believe Concord lay so near, and just 84 years before came the shot heard round the world, the start of the American War for Independence, which so shook the European continent with frightening and exhilarating new ideas. A milieu of wealth and squalor lay before his eyes, and his belly trembled in nervous anticipation. His heart went out to those on board. Hope and fear glimmered in the eyes of young and old alike. How must it feel to leave all that one once knew, to set foot on this land, in the press of the horde of so many others like them, knowing they would never return home? Yet their world was not the one he was about to enter. His journey would take him far into the wilds, the distant West, where the great forests blanketed the land, and people were few and far between, where natives still roamed free and outlaws terrorized. Would it be like the tales he'd heard in the newspapers and letters from abroad? The next morning saw him, ticket in hand, at the platform for a train to Buffalo. The smell of coal fire was thick in the air, and soot clung to the iron scaffolding as he waited to board. Soon the chug-chug of the locomotive pulled the long snaking line of cars out of the bustling downtown and into the outskirts, past the squalor of camps that lined the tracks. The great whistle blasted a mighty bellow of steam as the train roared down the line, threatening all to move and move quickly. Suddenly, Boston fell away, revealing an expanse of green fields and dark forests, where tiny houses and homesteads dotted the land, clustering in small villages. It reminded Ambrose of the hamlets in the hills of Constance, and he smiled at the sad nostalgia of his boyhood home. 2 long days had passed. The moon had since set, and Orion crept across the pre-dawn sky when they arrived in Buffalo. Gas lamps glowed softly, flickering as moths circled in the warm summer night. Few souls stirred. The city had not yet woken, and none save the unsavory characters of night roamed the black streets. Clutching his money in his pocket, he held fast his bags and waited in the station until the red rays of dawn lit the morning sky. He must have cut a queer figure, a solitary man in black cassock, a priest out at odd hours. The wharf was but a block away, and the honk of geese filled the air as he lugged his bags to the waiting steamer. The tiny shops that lined the street in old red brick gave way to the rough cut and weathered gray of the warehouses at the docks, and finally the blue immensity of Lake Erie opened into view. Oil shimmered on the water, purples and blues and reds in the waves, as the steamer, the Plymouth Rock, idled in the bay. Its furnace bellowed as the engine roared. Ambrose boarded and sat above deck, looking at the shore and the mass of people that had come to bid farewell to loved ones. Men stood on the docks to watch the rumble and shake of the massive ship, while women in fashionable American dress, gaily colored in bright reds and blues, waved handkerchiefs. They reminded him of his sister Monica, who had stood on the shore of Le Havre just 3 weeks ago to see him off on his journey. Her golden hair had sparkled in the sun above cheeks of rosy red. It already seemed a lifetime ago. Suddenly the deafening horn blasted in the harbor, shattering his reminiscence, and the engines sprang to life, the ship shuddering as it gathered speed, leaving the land behind. With piercing cries, gulls alighted in the air, following the churn and gobbling the dead fish in the ship's wake, and soon they were in open waters. Another boat, Ambrose grumbled. The thought of being held captive on the water once again filled him with dread. Toledo came and went, iron everywhere, spanning the Maumee River and jutting into the bay. Tracks ran like webs from the train station, extending in every direction, and Ambrose found himself on a passenger car of the Great Western Railway. The land sped by in a blur of green, while plumes of blue cigar smoke turned lazily in the air, the acrid haze mixing with the musky smell of unwashed bodies in the summer heat. The rhythmic click of the wheels on the tracks lulled Ambrose to sleep as he sat sweating in the hot sun that poured through the window. "Are you going west too, Father?" a crackly voice asked. Ambrose opened his eyes to see the pimply face of a boy barely in his teens sitting across from him. Greasy red hair fell in a mop against his oily forehead as he flashed a yellow smile. "Yes, to the state of Wisconsin," Ambrose folded his hands politely. "Church business." "How about you?" The boy nodded. "Everyone is going west. I'm going to find me a farm. I just have to save up enough. I might even head to California and see if that gold rush really is played out. There's a fortune for me somewhere, and I'm going to find it." Ambrose looked at the boy's clothes in concern. His old trousers and shirt were torn and patched many times over, and his toes stuck out from holes in his shoes. "How old are you?" 13 last month." "What about your parents?" The boy shrugged. "Don't know anymore. Told myself that's the last time I'd get a drunken whooping across the backside. My brother Sam left when he was 12, too. It's a big country, but maybe I'll find him someday." Ambrose frowned. "Do you have any money?" "Well, don't reckon I need much, and I'll work besides. I can hunt and trap, and I can sleep outdoors. There's plenty of places to camp if you know the signs. Lots of folk hitch a ride on the rails, I heard. I just told the conductor my pa was on the train, and if I didn't get aboard, I'd catch hell." Ambrose dug into his pocket, fishing for change. The silver dollar was worn and smooth in his palm as he extended his hand. He only wished he could do more. The homeless and poor were everywhere. Was it really too much to hope this land would be any different? The boy's eyes grew wide and his hand trembled. He stared in awe at the silver coin, then pocketed it nervously lest anyone see. "Thanks, mister." A week later, the train from Milwaukee plunged into black woods. The open soil of worked fields ended before a tangle of trees and brambles, the mighty forest of the frontier and the end of western expansion so far. Shades of green lay one on top of the other as the untamed wilderness swallowed the rail line that led farther and farther away. Only the occasional station showed any evidence that men lived so far in the middle of nowhere, or at least had lived, for many times Ambrose saw not another living soul, and had it not been for the car filled with dirty and disheveled immigrants, he might have thought himself the last man in all the world. On and on the journey continued, by train to Fond du Lac and by carriage to Brothertown, until finally a bright and sunny morning found him on an ox cart bound for St. Gregory. It lumbered down a rutted two-track as it plunged deep into virgin forest. Elms and ash and beech and maple blotted out the sun as their thick arms reached to the sky, casting the forest floor in perpetual night. The farther they went, the more uncertain Ambrose felt. How would he find Stephen in a land so vast and dark? Worse, would he become lost like him, unable to find his own way back? His thoughts troubled him, and the strange driver beside made him feel no better. The old fellow spoke little, only laughing at Ambrose's questions or muttering to himself behind a long white beard, but what he said, Ambrose could never tell. Finally, the sun drew long shadows in the west, trickling in golds and reds that flittered in the leaves as they came upon the town. Dirt roads were lined with wattle and daub homes, yellow in the coming dusk. It seemed a proper town at first glance. They passed the stables, the Hotel St. Gregor, the post office, all the normal businesses one would expect. But the town appeared deserted, the clop and creak of the ox and cart the only sounds on the empty road. "Where is everyone?" Ambrose said. "Eh?" The man turned and spoke for the last time. "Praying." Ambrose's skin crawled and he looked about. Here and there the flicker of drawn curtains revealed pale faces staring. Somber eyes squinted and followed, making it plain he didn't belong. When they finally crept to the south of the town, night settled in a sky of reds and purples. The road meandered on into a shadowed wood that opened into a meadow beyond, where a graveyard lay in the distance. Ambrose looked nervously at the white tops of gravestones. In the dim light, the meadow seemed dead, as if conjured from old children's stories, and he couldn't help but feel he had entered a bewitched land. He swore he felt eyes upon him, as if shadows in the trees followed his passage, and in his mind he pictured figures with ill intent. The townsfolk, the brothers in the abbey, or the ghosts of the dead in the graveyard nearby. Laughing nervously, he rubbed his eyes. "My mind is getting the better of me." The road turned and Valentine's creation came into view. Rough and weathered buildings sat in the long shadow of the wood, the dormitory and rectory and the various outbuildings, and above all, rising from the shadow into the night sky was the chapel, its black steeple and cross clear against the gray clouds beyond, the Abbey of the Holy Ghost. A man in his 50s stood waiting by the door to the rectory, balding and plump with a jolly smile. His simple brown robe stretched tight across his fat belly and his voice was a rumbling baritone. "Father Ambrose." Ambrose hesitated. "Yes." "Of course," the man said, extending his hand. "Who else would it be?" "I'm Father Meinhardt. We've been expecting you, but we were expecting 3. Father Tobias Schenk and Father Killian Plank. Yes, they were unfortunately delayed. They won't be arriving for another month." "So you'll be staying with us that long," Meinhardt said. "Wonderful. That will give you plenty of time to become acquainted with our fair town. I understand this is your first time in the Americas. You'll be shocked at all we've accomplished in just 5 short years. You may even find this place suits you and you'll wish to stay, especially after you've heard the words of Father Valentine." Ambrose smiled doubtfully. "Tell me, when can I meet with him? I'd like to express my thanks for his hospitality. And of course there are some questions." "He's on private retreat in the forest," Meinhardt said. "I'm afraid you'll have to wait." "A retreat? Alone?" "Certainly. He goes when the mood strikes. Sometimes he's gone for weeks. The Lord takes care of him, never you worry. Of course, in his absence, the town and people are at your disposal and you're free to go where you will. But so long as you stay at the Abbey, you'll be expected to adhere to the schedule." "Well, of course." And one more thing," Meinhardt said. "Father Valentine has also graciously asked Dr. Albrecht that you be made aware if anything strange or noteworthy occurs. As nothing ever does occur in our quiet town, this should dispel any of the awful rumors that reach the old country." Ambrose nodded and looked uneasily at the looming building. "You sure there's nothing peculiar about this town?" It was an awkward question, and he immediately regretted it. "Are you an investigator?" Meinhardt asked, raising one bushy brow. "Or are you rather an inquisitor?" "Neither. I'm simply looking for someone dear to me, who's gotten himself lost." "You're Bishop Stephen. I hope you find him. And as to your question, you should know there are strange things in every town. Now, you've had a very long journey and must be exhausted. Let's get you inside and get you settled. Meinhardt grasped the wooden doors, opening them to the black hall beyond, then motioned for Ambrose to enter. His face was a cheery smile, but in the shadowed light of the lantern it appeared as a grimace. Fear knotted Ambrose's heart as he peered inside. There was no turning back. The door closed with a thud, and the darkness swallowed. If you're a fan of Midwest Gothic and would like to be notified about the next chapter and any upcoming stories, please click like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for listening.